March 15, 1987. Danny Cross had been Hollywood's rising star for exactly 18 months. That night, at Arnold Schwarzenegger's rap party, he made the biggest mistake of his life. Those muscles are faker than your accent, Austrian boy. 300 industry insiders heard it. Cameras caught it. By morning, every major studio in Hollywood had Danny Cross on a blacklist that didn't officially exist. What happened in the next 72 hours became the most buried story in Hollywood history. 5 studio heads held emergency meetings. 3 talent agencies made calls that were never logged. And for 25 years, when people asked what happened to Danny Cross, the answer was always the same. Who? The night Danny Cross mocked the wrong man. The night Hollywood proved some careers don't just end, they disappear. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The champagne glass shattered against Arnold's chest before anyone could process what Danny Cross had just said. Crystal fragments caught the party lights like fallen stars as 300 of Hollywood's most powerful people stood frozen in a tableau of shock. Victor Steele felt his blood turn to ice water. From his position near the bar, he watched his client, his golden boy, his meal ticket, standing there with that same cocky grin that had charmed casting directors from Paramount to Warner Brothers. Danny didn't understand. The kid never understood when to stop. Arnold Schwarzenegger stood perfectly still, champagne dripping from his tuxedo, his face a mask of controlled fury. But it was the silence that terrified Victor. Not just Arnold's silence. The entire room had gone dead quiet. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Danny. Victor's voice came out as a strangled whisper as he pushed through the crowd. Danny, we need to... Relax, Vic. Danny's laugh was sharp, theatrical. He was playing to the room now, feeding off what he mistook for fascination instead of horror. Just giving our Austrian friend some honest feedback. Isn't that what this town's about? Honesty? Someone in the crowd, Victor thought it might have been Joel Silver, let out a nervous cough. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They were all waiting to see how this played out, these vultures in designer gowns and $1,000 suits. Arnold stepped forward, one step, then another. His massive frame cast a shadow over Danny, who had to crane his neck to maintain eye contact. When Arnold spoke, his voice was quiet, measured, deadly. You know nothing about real strength, little man. That's when Victor saw them. The studio heads, all watching from different corners of the room like chess pieces positioning for endgame. Michael Eisner near the windows, Jeffrey Katzenberg by the dessert table. Sherry Lansing in deep conversation with someone Victor didn't recognize, someone with dead eyes and an expensive suit. Fake muscles on a fake man, Danny continued, seemingly oblivious to the quicksand opening beneath his feet. Come on, Arnold. We all know what you really are. A cartoon character with a speech impediment. The sound that came from Arnold's throat wasn't quite human. It was the growl of something primal, something that had clawed its way up from nothing to become one of the most powerful forces in Hollywood. His hand moved toward Danny's throat. Arnold. The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Victor turned to see Irving Azoff materialize beside them, his small frame somehow commanding the attention of the entire room. Not here, not tonight. Arnold's hand stopped inches from Danny's neck. His blue eyes locked onto the young actor's face with an intensity that made Victor's knees weak. You have no idea what you have done, Arnold said, his accent somehow more pronounced now, more threatening. But you will learn. He turned and walked away, the crowd parting before him like the Red Sea. Within seconds he was gone, leaving behind only the echo of his words and the sharp smell of spilled champagne. The party didn't end. That was the most terrifying part. Conversations resumed. The quartet started playing again. People laughed and drank and networked as if nothing had happened. But Victor caught the glances, the subtle nods, the way certain people excused themselves to make phone calls. Jesus Christ, Danny! Victor grabbed his client's arm, fingers digging into expensive fabric. Do you have any idea what you just did? I made a statement. Danny's confidence was starting to crack around the edges, but he was still riding the adrenaline. This town's full of fake people with fake everything. Someone had to call it out. You just destroyed yourself. Victor's voice was barely audible over the renewed party chatter. You insulted Arnold Schwarzenegger in front of every major player in Hollywood. These people don't forget. They don't forgive. You're being dramatic." But Danny's eyes were darting around the room now, finally noticing the cold shoulders, the averted gazes, the way conversations died when he approached groups of people. Victor watched Joel Silver walk past without acknowledgement, the same Joel Silver who had been courting Danny for his next action picture just hours earlier. He saw Sherry Lansing accept a business card from the man with dead eyes, then glance meaningfully in their direction. "We're leaving. Now." Victor's hand was already on Danny's back, guiding him toward the exit. "And tomorrow, you're going to call every journalist in this town and apologize. You're going to—" "I'm not apologizing for anything." Danny shrugged off Victor's grip. "You know what? Maybe it's time I got new representation. Someone who believes in taking risks." Those were the last words Danny Cross spoke as a Hollywood insider. By the time they reached the parking lot, Victor's phone was already buzzing with calls from studio executives, fellow agents, and people whose names he recognized but whose numbers he'd never seen before. The machine was already in motion. The gears were turning, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the party lights, Danny Cross's career was beginning its 72-hour descent into oblivion. Victor Steele had been in Hollywood long enough to know the sound of a man signing his own death warrant. He just hadn't expected it to happen at a rap party. To answer his phone for the rest of the night. He sat in his Beverly Hills office until dawn, watching the city lights blur through the floor-to-ceiling windows, listening to voicemail after voicemail pile up like death notices. Each message was another door slamming shut, another bridge burning, another nail in Danny Cross's professional coffin. By 6 a.m., there were 47 messages. The first few were from studio executives, their voices carefully neutral as they postponed meetings about Danny's upcoming projects. Then came the journalists, circling like sharks who'd caught the scent of blood. Finally, the vultures, competing agents already moving to poach Victor's other clients, their voices thick with false sympathy and barely concealed glee. "Victor, it's Michael at CAA. Just wanted to check in about Jennifer's deal. I know you must be distracted. Right now, delete. Victor, this is Variety. We're running a story about last night's incident and delete. Mr. Steele, this is Klaus Brenner. We represent certain Austrian interests. Perhaps we should talk." Victor's finger froze over the delete button. The accent was slight but unmistakable. He saved the message and immediately regretted it. The morning sun painted his office walls the color of old blood. Victor poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, then stared at it for 10 minutes before pouring it back into the bottle. He'd been sober for 18 months. His daughter Emma was the reason he'd quit drinking, the reason he'd done a lot of things differently since his divorce. She was 12 now, all elbows and attitude and dreams of following in Daddy's footsteps into the entertainment business. The thought of Emma made his chest tighten. In this town, reputation was currency, and his was about to be devalued by association. Agents who couldn't control their clients were agents who couldn't be trusted. And in Hollywood, trust was everything. His secretary Janet arrived at 8, took one look at the stack of message slips, and quietly closed the door behind her. She'd been with him for 15 years, had seen him through the rise from nobody to somebody, through the messy divorce, through the custody battles. She understood the language of crisis. "Coffee's brewing," she said, settling behind her desk with practiced efficiency. "I've already started damage control, canceled Danny's interviews for the rest of the week. His publicist is having a nervous breakdown, but I told her we'd handle statements." "There won't be any statements." Victor's voice came out like gravel. Not from Danny, anyway. Janet's fingers paused over her keyboard. In the morning light, the lines around her eyes seemed deeper. "Victor, what exactly happened last night?" he told her. All of it. The champagne glass, the insults, the way Arnold's face had gone from human to something else entirely, the studio heads positioning themselves like chess pieces, the man with dead eyes whose business card Sherry Lansing had accepted so meaningfully. When he finished, Janet was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Los Angeles was waking up, the hum of traffic on Sunset, the distant sound of construction, the normal rhythms of a city built on dreams and delusion. "How long do you think Danny has?" she asked finally. 72 hours, maybe less. And you? That was the question Victor had been avoiding all night. In Hollywood, guilt by association wasn't just a concept, it was a death sentence. Agents were supposed to protect their clients from themselves, supposed to anticipate disasters before they happened. Victor had seen Danny's reckless streak, had watched him push boundaries at premieres and parties. He should have intervened sooner. I don't know, he admitted. Janet pulled up her computer screen, scanning through industry news sites with practiced efficiency. Nothing yet, but give it a few hours. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Steele? Your daughter's online too. Victor's hand trembled slightly as he reached for the phone. Emma always called before school, their daily ritual since the divorce. She'd tell him about her classes, her friends, her latest obsession with old movies. She wanted to be an actress, had inherited both her mother's beauty and her father's understanding of storytelling. Hi, sweetheart. Daddy, I had the weirdest dream last night. You were in it, and there was this big, scary man, and everything was falling down around you. Her voice was bright with the resilience of childhood, but there was something underneath it that made Victor's throat constrict. Just a dream, Em. Dreams can't hurt you. I know, but... She paused, and he could picture her chewing on her bottom lip the way she did when she was thinking. You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? If you were in trouble? Victor stared out at the city spreading below him, the hills of Hollywood, the sprawl of the valley, the ocean shimmering in the distance like a promise of escape. Somewhere out there, Danny Cross was probably still sleeping off his performance, still believing he'd made some kind of brave statement. He had no idea that his phone would stop ringing, that his agent would drop him, that the industry would close ranks and erase him as efficiently as a computer deleting a corrupted file. Everything's fine, Victor lied to his daughter. I love you, Em. After she hung up, he sat in the silence of his office and wondered how much longer that would be true. The silence stretched for exactly 17 minutes. Victor knew because he'd been staring at the clock on his desk, watching the second hand make its relentless circuit while his mind raced through damage control scenarios. None of them ended well. When the phone rang again, he almost didn't answer. Emma had called, the vultures had circled, and every other conversation would only make things worse. But something about the sharp, insistent tone made him reach for the receiver. Victor Steele. Good morning, Mr. Steele. My name is Marcus Webb. I represent certain publishing interests. The voice was smooth, professional, with the kind of carefully neutral accent that suggested expensive education and even more expensive dental work. Victor had heard that tone before, usually right before someone asked for something that would cost him everything. If you're calling about Danny Cross, no comment. Actually, I'm calling about a book deal. A memoir, you might say. Very compelling story about Hollywood power, conspiracy, and the price of speaking truth to power. Webb paused, letting the words sink in. The author is someone you know quite well, Danny Cross. Victor's blood turned to ice water for the second time in 12 hours. Danny's writing a book? Oh, Mr. Steele, this conversation would be much more productive if we didn't pretend ignorance. The smooth tone never wavered, but there was steel underneath now. Mr. Cross has been working on his memoir for some time. Erased. How Hollywood's elite destroyed an actor for telling the truth. Quite a provocative title, don't you think? The office walls seemed to be closing in. Victor gripped the phone so hard his knuckles went white. Danny Cross hasn't been relevant for 25 years. Nobody cares about... Oh, but they do. Especially when the story involves Arnold Schwarzenegger, studio conspiracies, and a certain talent agent who orchestrated one of Hollywood's most complete character assassinations. Webb's chuckle was like ice cracking. Mr. Cross has been very thorough in his research. Names, dates, phone records. Even some rather interesting details about Austrian business connections. The message from Klaus Brenner flashed through Victor's memory. We represent certain Austrian interests. What does Danny want? Mr. Cross will be in Bakersfield this afternoon. I believe you have a small acting studio there? Steele's Academy for Dramatic Arts? Charming little place. He'd like to visit. Old time's sake. Victor's mouth went dry. Danny knew where he lived, knew about the studio, about the carefully constructed life Victor had built in exile, about the 37 recovering addicts and wannabe actors who trusted him to guide their dreams, about Emma, who visited every other weekend, tell him to stay away. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, Mr. Cross has some questions about that night in 1987, about phone calls that were made, about meetings that happened, about how a promising young actor's career could disappear so completely that he spent 15 years living in his car. Webb's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He's particularly curious about your role in making sure he stayed disappeared. The room began to spin. Victor pressed his palm against the desk, trying to anchor himself to something solid. 25 years of carefully maintained sobriety, of rebuilding, of creating a life where he helped people instead of destroying them. All of it balanced on a knife's edge. I don't know what Danny thinks he remembers, but memory can be such a fragile thing, can't it? But Mr. Cross has been very careful about documentation, very careful about proof. The sound of papers shuffling came through the line. For instance, there's a rather interesting receipt from a private investigator named Morrison, paid for by your agency. Instructions to follow Mr. Cross and document any unseemly behavior that might be used against him. Dated 3 days after the incident, Victor's vision grayed at the edges. Morrison. He'd forgotten about Morrison. There's also the matter of the photographs, Webb continued conversationally. The ones Morrison took of Mr. Cross in some rather compromising situations. The ones that found their way to certain studio executives just before his last few auditions were mysteriously canceled. Stop! And then there's the audio recording. From that final meeting in your office when you explained to Mr. Cross exactly why his career was over and why it would be healthier for him to leave Los Angeles permanently. He was wearing a wire, Mr. Steele. Clever boy. The scotch bottle on Victor's desk seemed to be calling to him, promising the familiar burn that would make all of this go away. His hand actually moved toward it before he caught himself. What does he want? Justice, truth, recognition of what was done to him. Webb's tone brightened, as if they were discussing lunch plans. And of course, compensation for 25 years of lost earnings. How much? Everything. The line went dead. Victor stared at the phone in his hand, listening to the dial tone that sounded like a death knell. Outside, Bakersfield was waking up under a merciless Central Valley sun. Somewhere in that heat, Danny Cross was coming for him, and this time, Victor had nowhere left to run. Victor sat frozen with the phone still pressed to his ear, the dial tone drilling into his skull like a dentist's bit. 25 years of careful reconstruction, of methodical anonymity, of teaching broken dreamers how to project confidence they didn't feel. All of it crumbling with the efficiency of a controlled demolition. He forced himself to set the phone down gently, as if sudden movements might shatter what remained of his composure. The scotch bottle caught the morning light, amber liquid promising temporary amnesia. His fingers traced the cap but didn't twist it. Not yet, maybe not ever again, but the day was young and getting darker by the minute. Janet. His voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. Janet, cancel my afternoon classes. No response from the intercom. He could hear her typing through the thin walls of his converted warehouse space, the steady rhythm of someone trying to maintain normalcy while the world tilted off its axis. She'd probably heard every word through the door. In 30 years of Hollywood, Victor had never been good at whispering. He walked to the window overlooking his small empire. Steele's Academy for Dramatic Arts occupied a converted auto repair shop on the wrong side of Bakersfield, where the Central Valley heat turned dreams into mirages and broken people came to learn new ways to pretend they weren't broken. 37 students this semester. Former addicts, failed actors, kids whose parents had given up on them. All of them looking to Victor for guidance, for hope, for the kind of second chance Hollywood had never bothered to offer. In the main studio, Miguel Santos was running morning voice exercises with the intermediate class. Victor watched the 19-year-old kid project confidence he'd never felt, teaching projection to people twice his age who hung on every word. Miguel had been homeless when Victor found him, hustling for change outside a Starbucks in downtown LA. Now he was assistant director, college-bound, clean for 18 months. One phone call from Danny Cross would destroy all of that. Scandal was a contagion in the entertainment business. It infected everything it touched, and Victor's students had come too far to watch their teacher's past drag them back into the darkness. Mr. Steele? Janet appeared in his doorway, her face carefully neutral in that way that meant she'd heard everything and was processing the implications. There's someone here to see you. Victor's stomach dropped. Danny? No, someone else. Says his name is Klaus Brenner. The accent from the voicemail. We represent certain Austrian interests. Victor's legs went weak. If Klaus Brenner was here in person, that meant the machinery was already in motion, the same machinery that had ground Danny Cross into dust 25 years ago. Tell him I'm not available. I tried. He said he'd wait. Janet's voice dropped to a whisper. Victor, there are 2 other men with him. They don't look like entertainment people. Through his window, Victor could see a black Mercedes in the parking lot, engine running, windows tinted dark as a judge's robes. The kind of car that appeared in variety obituaries and Vanity Fair exposés about the darker side of Hollywood power. Where is he? Conference room. He insisted on waiting inside. Janet paused. He knew about Emma. The world tilted another few degrees. Victor gripped the windowsill, watching Miguel lead his students through breathing exercises while men in expensive suits waited to discuss the price of silence. Emma wouldn't visit for another week, but these people had done their homework. They knew his schedule, his weaknesses, his pressure points. What exactly did he say about her? That it would be unfortunate if your family got pulled into this situation. That Mr. Cross's memoir might include details about your personal life that could be difficult for a young actress trying to establish herself. Victor closed his eyes and saw Emma's face, bright with ambition and trust in her father's ability to protect her dreams. She was 17 now, about to graduate, already auditioning for college theater programs. Her whole life stretched ahead of her like an unwritten script, full of possibility and promise, unless Danny Cross decided to burn it all down. Mr. Steele? Janet's voice seemed to come from very far away. What should I tell him? Victor opened his eyes and stared at his reflection in the window glass. 58 years old, 25 pounds heavier than his Hollywood days, wearing jeans and a polo shirt instead of Armani suits. He looked like what he was, a man who had run as far as geography would allow and discovered it wasn't far enough. Give me 5 minutes, then send him in. Janet disappeared, leaving Victor alone with his choices. He could run again, pack up the academy and disappear into some even smaller town where the shadows of 1987 couldn't reach. But Emma would still be out there, vulnerable. His students would still need someone to believe in them. And Danny Cross would still have his evidence, his recordings, his 25 years of carefully documented rage. Outside, Miguel was teaching his class how to project strength they didn't feel. Inside, Victor was about to learn whether any of his own lessons had taken root. The conference room door opened behind him. Mr. Steele, a voice said with just the hint of an Austrian accent. We need to talk.